Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
First one is titled, Neighbor Complained to the HOA About My Yard. So, I have a Karen for a neighbor. She's a grumpy old C with a live-in son in his 40s and no other family or friends. And when I say she's a Karen, we're talking to the point that she came into my property to yell at our landscaper about a boulder he was installing on our property, something about believing it would fall over onto more of our property. A few months after we moved in, we receive a letter trying the HOA saying they'd received complaints and asking that we make sure we're mowing, watering and maintaining. I chalked it up to moving into a nicer neighborhood and made an effort to mow twice a week instead of my normal once, added a little time to the sprinklers, and figured all was good. Apparently it was not all good, as we received another letter stating the complaints had continued and the HOA wanted to talk with us to see what the problem was. I should note, we had just moved in not that long ago, and hadn't landscaped the back yet, so we're letting our dogs pee on the front at night, which lead to the inevitable patches of bright green grass that grow stupid fast. Now I'll freely admit I don't keep my yard to the level of some of my neighbors, but it was in perfectly good shape outside some green spots in an otherwise average-looking yard, and I do my best to keep things mowed and looking decent. Turns our grumpy C had taken real offense to this and started complaining to the HOA. The hearing ended up being mostly incoherent rambling, but the bottom line was she didn't like how our lawn looked with the green spots. While the HOA agreed this was not her business and definitely not theirs, I decided she was right and we should stop letting our dogs out in the front to pee, as I also don't like the green spots. Now, I put them on the leash and let them do their business in her yard, read, tree lawn. And I'm clearly not the only one, as her entire yard is now covered in pee spots and dead spots on her actual lawn, which my dogs don't step for on. I'm pretty sure she's complained about everyone with a dog, and now the entire neighborhood takes their dogs to her yard. The best part, she actually does a shitty job taking care of her lawn, weeds and crabgrass everywhere. She just waters it almost non-stop. So today I got to report her to the HOA for her yard looking like total crap. If it were any other house, there are much worse, I wouldn't care at all. But this lady wanted lawns without spots, so I'm just doing my part to enforce her rules. Edit. To everyone hating on HOAs, they're hit and miss for sure, but in this case they didn't do anything but tell me someone complained and then tell her I wasn't violating any rules and they weren't going to be involved. Also, HOAs are often surprisingly easy to take over. You just have to skip the whining about how terrible they are and do the work instead. If the HOA is that bad, talk to some neighbors, tell them you're going to run for the board, and get them to vote for you. Then, help others do the same, and remember what you hated about the previous board. Be forewarned, everyone finds a reason to complain, no one is will to help out. Edit 2. For everyone about green grass from dog pee. Urea, ammonium, nitrogen for plants. If you don't water, it stays concentrated in one area, killing the grass. If you do water, or just spray the spot with a hose quickly, it's diluted and gives the grass a big boost of organic nitrogen fertilizer. Next one is titled, Typical Jerk Neighbors Complain About the Truck in My Yard, so I replace it. I live in a mostly quiet neighborhood with lots of snowbirds and weekenders because of the proximity to a lake. The year-rounders are mostly retired and people generally get along fine. A couple years ago, neighbors on one side built a new garage and driveway, moving their cars much closer to my existing forsythia hedge. I love the forsythia in the spring and basically let it grow however it likes so I can have the bright yellow flowers. Almost immediately they started complaining that the hedge blocked their view as they backed out of their driveway. In my state, neighbors have no right to a view extending over someone else's property, and our Supreme Court has repeatedly ruled that as long as trees and bushes do not actually impinge onto the roadway, property owners have no obligation to trim for visibility. I keep a 5-foot strip mowed between my hedge and the road, perfectly reasonable to my way of thinking. Since they have no recourse hedges, they instead complain to county code enforcement about anything else they can think of. My brother parked his licensed and insured project truck on my property a while back because he was in the process of moving and needed a spot for it while he was figuring things out. In the meantime, he was in a bad accident in another vehicle and the truck has been sitting for over a year now. The license plate recently expired and I got a letter from the county with threats of fines if it wasn't removed. Cue the malicious compliance. My brother decided to sell the truck for scrap and had it towed away this morning. This gave my neighbors their temporary victory as they observed from their deck and nearly 6 inches of improved view from their driveway. At least until I moved my second vehicle, a 1960 Lincoln, which is about 2 feet longer than the truck, with current plates and insurance, into that place this afternoon. As a single person with more than one vehicle, I may get around to driving that old car at least once more before winter. Next one is titled, "Can't replace my boots unless they're damaged?" Okay then. For some reason, this story popped into my mind randomly last night. Somewhere in the I went to basic training with the Army. As part of my issue, I received 2 pairs of boots, affectionately known as summers and winters, for obvious reasons. I tried them on at SIF and had a hard time with the summers. They had this god-awful seam that was chewing at the back of my heels. SIF in all their wisdom said, "They fit. Nothing we can do." It was so bad that I was bleeding, and couldn't even march. I was in tears from the pain. I figured it was worth getting smoked for wearing winters in June. It was such a relief to not feel constant grinding on my heels, I didn't even care. They eventually had to put me on a sneaker profile while at camp on the 12-mile. Finally, after 10 weeks suffering by boot or by smoking, we made it to 8. At 8, soldiers are allowed to DX, trade in, clothing where we weren't allowed at all in basic. So off I go to DX my boots. Finally, I fill in my form, hand the boots over, and get told, "Sorry, we can't DX clothing unless it's damaged." I explained the situation and the soldier at the counter stared at me and restated, "They're not damaged." Resigned to my fate, I took my boots of pain plus 3 AC to a nearby bench where a fellow soldier sat. She wielded a pair of scissors with such ferocity that her boots didn't stand a chance. I asked her in my E3 naivete, "Why are you cutting holes in your boots?" She explained to me that SIF won't allow a DX unless the item is damaged. I was shocked. What a waste of money. What a waste of boots that may have some redeeming value as a planter. She then handed me the scissors. "Need them? I'm done." She raised her eyebrow as to ask. I grabbed the scissors and went to town on those damn boots. I revisited the counter with my damaged boots. The DX went smoothly, and my new summers fit great. I never had another problem with boots in my 6 years. Next one is titled, "Take 2 paid days off to think about why you want to continue working here." Many years ago I got a job working in a retail store. This store and 2 others were owned by a young couple and another young woman. I worked there happily for about a year and became very good at my job, which including reminding the owners when stock needed replacing, merchandising, etc. At one point we lost a few staff in rapid succession, leaving myself and my friend as the only long-term staff. Then my friend was offered a managerial position with one of our competitors, so she left as well. This left me to train all the new staff, run the floor, deal with vendors, place orders, do pricing, basically manage the store. So I approached the owners about being named the new manager since I was already doing the job just without the pay or title for several months. They said, "That sounds great, but we'd like you to do a management course before we make it official. But before you do that, can you just wait a couple more months until all the new staff has been trained?" I naively agreed to do this, thinking long term it would be to my benefit. Now during the waiting time, one of the new staff got very chummy with the owners. She had never worked retail before, wasn't particularly good at the job, but was super friendly to them. Next thing I know, they have appointed her the new manager. Needless to say, I didn't take this news particularly well, especially considering she was still constantly asking me how to do things. Let's just say my attitude towards work changed drastically. I no longer gave a crap. Stock was getting low? Not my job. Next week's roster hasn't been done? Not my job. I still performed all the tasks I was paid to do and all my customers loved me, but I stopped doing any extra work. So then I get dragged into the owner's office for a meeting. We have noticed that your attitude has changed, you aren't going above and beyond, blah blah. So we would like to give you the next 2 days off to think about why you want to continue to work here, and we would like it in writing. Before I had even walked out, I knew I was going to be resigning. I went home, talked to my husband, and he agreed I should just quit. So I took my 2 paid days off to spend time with my family and get a new job. When I went back into work, I was greeted with smiles and they eagerly took the piece of paper I handed them. The look on their faces dropped to shock when they realized what they were reading was my resignation and not an account of how much I loved working there and all the reasons I wanted to stay. I worked my 2 weeks' notice and happily left to greener pastures at my new job. Less than a year later, their store closed down, so I guess their choice of manager didn't go so well. Next one is titled, Free Sample. I worked at a grocery store deli where we were supposed to offer a sample of the sliced lunch meat prior to finishing the order, to ensure it was cut to their preference and they could take the sample to taste it if they wanted to. We would get mystery shopped, so the managers were really militant about it, and I had already been told a few times that I needed to be better about doing it, or they'd write me up. It was just annoying to get the meat out, slice a piece, check it with the customer and then go back to slicing, especially if we were slammed busy. One day I had a young couple ask me to slice a fairly thick piece, maybe 1/2 inch, of lunch meat ham so they could cube it and put it in a quiche. I said sure, no problem, and to ensure compliance with work policy, I sliced them a 1/2 inch thick slice and handed it to them and asked if they'd like a sample. They nervously glanced at each other and then me and said, "Seriously?" I said, "Of course, we always slice a sample." They kept it, put it in the bag with the non-sample slice, and essentially got a 2-for-1 special. Not a huge victory, but just petty enough to make me feel nice. Next one is titled, 2 weeks notice in writing. My very first job was working fast food, at Wendy's. I was 16, and most of my coworkers were also teenagers. There was always work to be done. If you have time to lean, you have time to clean, but working afternoons, evenings with a bunch of teens, there was also plenty of ducking around. Work wasn't the greatest, but it wasn't really that bad either, it was tolerable. Then we got a new manager. This guy was in his 40s, and he was a lifer. He was super strict, and was not about having fun at work at all. Unfortunately, I quickly became his favorite work vessel, because I was easier to control than some of my coworkers. He leaned heavily on me, to pick up the slack that the others left. It got real old, real fast. Why should I work more than everybody else, for the same pay? Why should I be stuck doing more tasks than my coworkers, who get to continue to goof off? I voiced my concerns to the manager, but nothing changed. He was usually busy hiding in the office, with the mirrored glass window, just watching everybody. He'd only surface on occasion to tell me to work harder, and give everybody else a free pass. Eventually, I had enough. One day, I marched into his office, and demanded that either I get a raise, or for him to hold everybody else to the same standards. He didn't go for that. I told him to consider that conversation my 2 weeks notice then. He said he needed that in writing. I ripped a sheet of paper out of a notebook on his desk and wrote some along the lines of, "This is my 2 weeks notice. Name." I walked outside his office, spit on the paper, and stuck it to his mirrored glass window. He could look at it all he wanted that way. I felt amazing. For the next 2 weeks, the manager kept letting me know that it wasn't too late to change my mind about quitting. He kept alluding to a raise, but never actually offered it. Update. For the doubters, yes, this was my personal experience. I started sometime in fall 2006, and quit in summer 2007. Also, I am aware that 2 weeks notice is a courtesy, not a necessity. It just seemed wrong to me to not give notice, and 2 wrongs don't make a right. Last one is titled, Stayed in Bed. Lately, I have been suffering from severe insomnia due to an illness. I sleep for an hour or 2 and then I'm wide awake for several hours. Well, like most people my age that totally abused their bodies when they were younger, I also have the body aches that sometimes makes it uncomfortable to lay for extended periods of time. So from time to time I go back to the couch to watch TV etc. to keep from bothering my so. Well, cut to last night, my so were preparing to go to bed for the evening. She told me I'm going to be pissed if I wake up alone again. This had happened the previous 2 days. She then clarified she wouldn't be pissed but upset. Anyway, I did not comment or say anything. As usual, she is instantly out and I'm laying there watching TV. For whatever reason, this is an especially bad sleep night. 4 hours later I'm still wide awake steaming TV shows, not being subtle or overly quiet. Oh, I need to use the restroom etc. I am constantly disturbing her and she isn't getting a decent night's sleep at all. At one point she tells me, if you can't sleep, why don't go to the living room if that would make you more comfortable. I reply, I think I'm about to fall asleep. Anyway, come morning we are up getting ready and she's saying how exhausted he is, how she didn't get any rest last night, etc. I just look at her and smile and say, at least you didn't wake up alone. I watch her face as she realizes how I intentionally complied with her desires. She told me I'm more than welcome to get up anytime I need to going forward. She was sorry that she made that comment. Thanks for listening.